Welcome to Cybersecurity Sense, a weekly podcast providing updates and insight into the latest in cybersecurity. Brought to you by LBMC Information Security. Now, here's your host.
Hi, I'm Bill Dean, Senior Manager here at LBMC Security. Thank you for joining us. Today, we're going to talk about how the manufacturing and industrial sectors are a prime target for attackers. Operational technology networks are used with specialized industrial control systems, or ICS, to monitor and control physical processes such as assembly lines, mixing tanks, and blast furnaces. These networks are ripe targets for adversaries, according to a new study from industrial cybersecurity company CyberX. They've recently published a pretty detailing report on some of the issues that we're going to cover in this podcast, and of course, the full link to the report will be in the show notes. So they describe that many of these networks are exposed to public internet and easy to crack using simple vulnerabilities, even like plain text passwords. The lack of even basic protections like antivirus can enable attackers to quietly perform reconnaissance before sabotaging physical processes. Once attackers get into an OT network, it's relatively easy for them to move around and to compromise industrial devices, which is kind of scary. Motives will range from criminal intent to operational disruption and even threats to human and environmental safety. In the report, Omer Schneider, CEO and co-founder of CyberX, stated, "We don't want to be cyber Cassandras, and this isn't about creating FUD, but we think business leaders should have a realistic, data-driven view of the current risk and what can be done about it." So CyberX analyzed production traffic, network traffic from 375 different OT networks worldwide across all sectors. It found that a third of industrial sites are connected to the internet, making them accessible by attackers and hackers across the internet, and malware exploiting vulnerabilities and misconfigurations. More than 3 out of 4 sites have obsolete Windows systems like Windows XP and Windows 2000, which of course leaves them vulnerable to destructive malware, such as the ransomware we've been seeing of late, whether it's WannaCry or NotPetya, even Trojans like Black Energy, and newer forms of ransomware that are definitely coming down the pike. Nearly 3 in 5 sites had plain text passwords traversing their control networks, which can easily be sniffed by attackers performing cyber reconnaissance and then used to compromise critical industrial devices. In addition, half of the sites don't even have antivirus protection. We all know antivirus isn't the end-all be-all, but we all agree that it's some type of protection is going to be needed. They found that almost half have at least one unknown or rogue device on the network, and 20% have wireless access points within these ICS networks, both of which can be used as entry points by the attackers. In addition, 82% of the industrial sites surveyed are running remote management protocols like RDP or terminal services that we've previously discussed in a podcast. VNC, or virtual network, I think it's virtual network control. It's remote control capability, and SSH. Once attackers have compromised an OT network, this makes it easier for them to learn how the equipment is configured and eventually manipulate it, which can be very dangerous. To further demonstrate these concerns, TheHill.com recently published an article titled "Feds Warn About Cyber Attacks on Energy Industrial Firms Moving Forward." And of course, the link will be in the show notes. They cite in the article that the Department of Homeland Security and the FBI, or Federal Bureau of Investigation, issued a joint statement on Friday warning of an increased danger posed to infrastructure sectors by malicious, air quote, multi-stage intrusion campaign, which agencies warned had successfully compromised several of their security networks. The analysis from CERT points to attack campaigns going on since at least May of 2017 that agencies have seen targeting the aviation, energy, and nuclear industries. The agencies did not name any specific networks that have been compromised by the attacks, though, for obvious reasons. But the article continues to cite that hackers reportedly used emails and malicious websites in a phishing campaign to obtain the credentials necessary to access and sabotage their networks. And we all have seen how the phishing campaign specifically, it's not as much attachments anymore, it's just obtaining credentials, are just wreaking havoc on almost every industry. According to the report, the campaigns first focus on, air quote, staging targets, third-party and peripheral organizations tied to the primary targets, which hackers then use to house their malware for attacks. Again, it's the third parties vendors that we oftentimes have to pay such close attention to. The agency said that the hackers were targeting the company-controlled sites of specific agencies to access information on equipment and organizational designs and, air quote, controlled system capabilities, close quote, that could be used to further harm the organizations. The new revelations of hacking attempts represent an escalation of initial threats identified by agencies in an earlier report provided by Reuters in June, of course that'll be in the show notes, which identified a narrow set of nefarious activity targeting the energy, nuclear, and manufacturing sectors. Of course, the CERT report will also be, or public service announcement, we'll put in the show notes. And so, yes, the industrial and manufacturing industries are a huge target, and we don't hear about those network compromises or network breaches nearly as much as what we hear about personally identifiable information or credit card information, because they do not have a duty to disclose to the public. So think about that. Manufacturers, industrial control systems, they don't have to disclose, so we don't hear about that, and they are getting attacked. Trust me when I tell you that they're being attacked, and often, especially the cleared contractors, for their intellectual property. Many people in these sectors that I speak with, they argue that they don't have anything of value. I hope the information in this podcast will change their minds just a little bit. Yes, you do have information of value. Your computer systems are of value, and they can be damaged. If you don't know where to begin, I suggest NIST, NIST''S Cybersecurity Framework Manufacturing Profile to perform a first level of a self-assessment, then perform an external penetration test. That's a good beginning point. There will be links in the show notes to do both of these. And then after that, it's very difficult to grade your own homework. So once you feel that you've got a control as to where you are, or, some type of hold on it, I strongly recommend to get a third party to perform, a risk assessment based on a framework such as ISO 27001 is a good place to start. It's hard to determine what you need to change if you don't know where you are. Between the self-assessment, external penetration test, and then a third-party risk assessment, you're going to get a real good feel as to what your risks are, mitigate, address them, or accept the risks, depending on what those are. So in closing, thank you for listening. Tune in next week for our next episode. And as always, if you have a particular topic that you would like to hear in the podcast, please contact me at bdean@lbmc.com. To learn more about LBMC Security and the services that we provide, please visit lbmcsecurity.com. Have a great week.